What's up, you guys? It's Sarah at carnivore.yogi on Instagram. Thank you so much for coming back to my YouTube channel and clicking on today's video. In this video, I'm going to share with you my very personal experience with fasting. This includes intermittent fasting as well as extended fasting, and talk to you about why I no longer practice these things in my life at this point right now. So before I jump into any of that, y'all know the drill. I'm not a doctor, nutritionist, or expert, and my personal experience with fasting does not invalidate yours. So if fasting works really well for you, you like it, fast till your heart is content. Keep doing what you're doing if it works for you, but I like to just continue to share my experience and my journey here on this channel. That's what it's all about. The other thing I would like to mention is context. It is really difficult to put yourself out on YouTube and on the internet because it's impossible to tell your entire life story. So when I'm talking about myself, I'm referring to context as in my age. I'm 41 years old, my stress level. I do have some pretty significant chronic stressors in my life that I don't talk about so much on this channel, but on both sides of our family, we have aging parents who require a lot of help. They're very disabled. I have a child with non-speaking autism. So I have a lot of stressors in my life that I think people forget about when they come to my channel, and fasting is a stressor. So I want to emphasize that. For some people, a stressor on the body, like running or lifting weights, those things are really good for your body. But at some point, the body can become overloaded with stressors. So that is a big part of this discussion, is taking into account your current life stress. And so that's something I want to talk about before I really dive into this topic in depth, is that I do have a lot of chronic stress in my life. I do my best to handle it through meditation, through yoga, and through a very healthy carnivore diet. All of those which support me and make me feel really good. Okay, so my personal experience with fasting. First of all, I really started diving into intentional fasting when I started the carnivore diet. I played around with it quite a bit over the last 10 years, and I don't think it was even really called fasting. It would just be called, I'm not going to eat until 5 o'clock because it's a really great way to control my weight. I did that for a lot of years while I was just doing paleo, and I didn't really even consider it fasting because back in my day, fasting wasn't as trendy as it is now, and it wasn't being talked about as much back then as it is now. But I was really kind of doing it on and off for a very long time. But when I started the carnivore diet, I really didn't intentionally do a lot of fasting, and then my appetite went down, and so it was like, oh, I could skip breakfast today. So, and I think that that can be okay, you guys. I think that, and this does happen for people. So when I talk about it in the context of fasting, I also want to clarify, I think fasting means that you are eating by a clock and not listening to your body's innate hunger signal. So forcing yourself to go beyond the time when you're just really hungry. So I think that if you wake up, and you're not really starving, hungry for breakfast, it's okay to wait a little bit before you eat. But if you wake up and you're hungry for breakfast and you're looking at your watch and you're like, oh, I got to hit the 16-hour mark, or I got to hit the 18-hour, 20-hour mark, and you're really having to push hard to do that, and you're doing that on a very consistent basis, that's what I was doing, I think it can start to cause problems. And for me, before I even did my first extended fast, I started experiencing issues with my menstrual cycle when I started doing this. So it started becoming irregular when I started really doing a lot of intermittent fasting and forcing that fasting, because when I started carnivore, fasting is also very, very, very trendy, and it still is. This is why I'm talking about this topic. And I just thought it was like part of the deal. The old school carnivores hadn't really come out yet and put themselves onto Instagram and YouTube the way that they are now, because I know a lot of the old school carnivores are like, don't fast, don't force it. So I just didn't have that data. I was listening more to what's trendy and what's available now, and it's a lot of information about autophagy and how great it is for you, which I'm not refuting that data at all. I'm just trying to talk to you guys about what happened to me and that I didn't necessarily see those things come to place for me. So I started having menstrual cycle issues right away, where my cycle just wasn't coming every 28 days as it had been before. Then after I was on carnivore about 4 months or so, I decided to start doing extended fasting because it was a challenge someone had put out there, and I was getting into the Instagram carnivore community and keto community, and it was something a lot of people were doing, and I was like, that'll be cool to do. So I jumped right in, and my first fast was a 72-hour fast. felt amazing. So I think fasting gives you a lot of cortisol. It boosts those hormones and you feel great, a lot of adrenaline. I meant to say not necessarily cortisol. Yes, it gives you cortisol, which I'll talk about, but it gives you a lot of adrenaline. So you're like feeling like you're on top of the world. And me, as someone who has a very addictive personality, I've talked about that in other videos here. I'll pop a little eye up at the video that I did earlier this week talking more about that. So addictive personality, I'm like, well, if 72 hours is great, then 5 days must be great, then 7 days. And so I just jumped right into this fasting thing. And what it did to me was not good. At first it felt really good, but then I started having side effects like I would finish a fast, and I've been working really hard on dealing with my binge eating behaviors, but I would find myself eating, 3 pounds, 4 pounds, sometimes more of meat in one sitting. And I'd be like, wow, I just really, really ate too much. And I know people say it's feasting and it's fasting, but for me, it felt kind of like out of control binge behavior. Now, because I've been working on my food issues quite a bit, I didn't go get ice cream. I didn't go get cake. I didn't go get all that stuff, but I have seen a lot of other people do that. I have seen a lot of other people who have had binging behaviors in the past. And when they do these extended fasts, or even if they're new to intermittent fasting and they haven't really trained their body to do it, they'll go off and do a binge. So that's something to really look out for. That was one thing that just made me uncomfortable. And then when I would eat a whole bunch of food like that, my body would gain weight really, really quickly. So the thing that is told a lot in the keto and carnivore community is that fasting does not slow down your metabolism. And while I think that there are some good studies out there, I did not find that to be true for me. I did find that when I was doing a lot of fasting, the extended fasting especially, that my metabolism was absolutely slowing down, and that I would, have that meal to refeed at the end of a fast, but then the subsequent weeks, I would regain all the weight and then some just by eating a normal amount of food. So I was probably sticking to around, 2,000 calories, and I know calories are a triggering subject for people to talk about, but it was the same amount of food that I had been eating before the fast. I wasn't eating more, and I wasn't eating less, and I was gaining weight by doing that. So I did see a metabolic slowdown for me when I was doing a lot of that extended fasting. The other thing that I started seeing was that I was losing lean body mass, that my muscles weren't pretty and popping anymore, and it was harder for me to recover from workouts at the gym. So, there was a study that was just put out, and you guys know I'm not a big person to talk about studies. I always say the most important study is the one that you do on yourself, but there was a recent study, which I will link below this video, that states that a lot of people in this study, the people who did fast actually did lose more lean body mass than the people who were eating the same amount of food, but not fasting, not doing a specific eating window. So now there is a little bit of data out there that shows that there can be lean body mass loss. Now again, this may not happen for everyone, and I'm not someone who cherry picks studies and data to support my evidence. I'm literally just telling you guys my story, and I'll keep going and quit blathering. But I did want to mention that was something that happened to me, and I would go online and I would read a lot of these doctors that say you're not going to slow down your metabolism, one, and you're not going to lose lean body mass, two, but both of those things happened for me. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just doing it wrong. And that's another reason why I have this channel, why I share my experience, is because I really hate for people to feel like they're doing everything wrong, right? So, okay, that's that point. The next thing that happened that was very significant for me was that my T3 was low and my sex hormones were all very low. And this was some lab work that I did in January. And at that point, I had stopped extended fasting last September. I had quit doing all the extended fasting last September. So from September to January, I was only doing intermittent fasting. That is it. No more extended fasting. My cycle still had not returned. It was still not regular. And when it did come, it was a nightmare. And because some people will say fasting will help your hormones, that was not my experience. And when I got my lab work done, I got that confirmation that my T3 was low, which basically means my metabolism has downregulated and my sex hormones were low. And the thing that we don't realize is that our bodies are incredibly intelligent. I mean, I wear this Oura ring, and I notice on the days when I don't eat as much that my resting heart rate is lower than on the the days when I eat more. I mean, it makes sense. If you're not going to have as much food coming into your body's going to say, okay, well, I don't need to burn off as much energy. I can start to downregulate things. And when you stop eating, when you shut that off, the first place that the blood flow leaves from is your sex hormones. So the first thing I tell women to look for is what happened to your cycle. Is it still regular? And if it's still regular, because let me tell you guys, at age 41, I cannot get away with the stuff that I could at age 35. Trust me on this. And definitely not the stuff I could get away with age 25. So the thing that I would tell for women, if they're like, oh, I'm still getting my cycle, check and see if you're ovulating. There are ways to do that. You can buy the ovulation P test kit strips, which will tell if you're having an LH surge. You need to confirm that with checking your basal body temperature, making sure that you're having that temperature rise, which will show the progesterone going up in your body, and that is being sustained until you get your cycle. So I'll talk more about that on my channel in future videos, but this just is really important that, you know, you might still be getting a cycle, especially if you're younger and a little bit more hormonally flexible, but you may not be ovulating. You may be downregulating that, and you may be downregulating your thyroid. You may have low T3, which is going to be that, you know, metabolism fuel for your body to burn fat. So what I see is people downregulating their T3, and they're like, why am I gaining so much weight? Well, the body has downregulated because you have continually sent that signal, as I was doing with a lot of the fasting. You've continued to send the signal to the body, we're not going to have food coming in, we're not going to have food come in. And so my body was very, very smart and down-regulated those things. So if you're worried about that stuff, I always put the link below for Let's Get Checked. You can check your thyroid, you can check your hormones. If that's something that you are worried about, concerned about, you can use those tests below. The other thing, and there's a lot of things here, that I was having issue with was unregulated blood sugar. So the carnivore diet is supposed to be amazing to regulate your blood sugar, but while I continued to do the fasting, I would still have these hyperglycemic episodes where I would have these energy crashes and just feel absolutely terrible. Now that could also be because I was eating more protein than my body needed, which I have done a video on that recently. I'll pop a little eye up in the corner, but you know, it's just something to take into consideration. If you're still having hypoglycemia and you're not eating carbohydrates, you're in a fat-burning metabolism, that shouldn't necessarily be happening. But for me, I was having those episodes still because I think I was pushing my body beyond its capacity with the fasting. 3 other things worth mentioning. Number 1 was my sleep. I started waking up quite a bit in the night, and then I would wake up also at like 5 o'clock in the morning and be like ready to go for the day. So my sleep was less and less, and some people will say, well, your body is working more efficient now, so you're going to sleep less when you're fasting, when you're in ketosis, you need less sleep. Maybe that's true for some people. I felt like crap when I wasn't getting my sleep. I didn't feel good. I felt very wired and I felt very jittery. And so when I quit the fasting, when I started eating within 30 minutes of waking up every day, when I started eating probably it was in a surplus and eating a high-fat carnivore diet, my sleep immediately got better within just a couple of weeks. So I think that's something important to look at. The other issue I had was electrolyte imbalance. I could never quite get those electrolytes balanced, and I still do tinker with that a bit, but it's a lot easier to balance my electrolytes when I'm not doing a ton of fasting and putting that extra stress on my body, because stress will cause your body to lose minerals. I just did 2 interviews with Morley Robbins where we talk extensively about minerals, but fasting is a stressor. Stress will make minerals leave your body. So it is a little harder to manage those electrolytes when you're doing a lot of fasting. All right, guys, so those are all the problems that I have, but let me talk a little bit, because I like to be solution oriented, about how I fix that. As I mentioned just now, I started eating within 30 minutes of waking. I switched to a high-fat carnivore diet and began eating throughout the day. And I stopped putting rules and limits on myself with my eating windows. I have to cut this off at 4 p.m. I have to cut this off at 5 p.m. No, if I was still hungry before bed, I would eat a little fat snack before bed. I would have a little bit of beef suet, a little bit of meat broth with butter in it. I would have a little something. And, you know, for a while, I did see the scale go up. I did, because when you've been in a deficit for so long and you've demanded that of your body for so long, there's a point where you have to do what's called a reverse diet. So I did really allow myself to go into more of a reverse diet, into a surplus situation for a solid 6 months before I said, you know what, I'm going to start tracking. I'm going to start trying to take some of this weight off. I'm going to start weighing and measuring my food. I just went 6 months and I was like, let me just be as intuitive about this as possible. I guess you could call it my personal like carnivore diet all-in journey. And it was very psychologically hard for me. And then I was like constantly looking at YouTube and Instagram and looking at people talking about their fasts and how well they're doing. And, you know, it's hard to not get distracted by that. And that's another reason why I put out this channel. I put out my videos because I know you guys are probably very confused because of all the different opinions, which I think I'll probably do a whole separate video about opinions and influencers and the damage that that can do to people. But I want to offer another perspective, just again, so that you don't feel like you're doing everything wrong. But the moral of the story is I was able to reverse that issue with my T3 without any medication. You know, my doctor even offered me some thyroid medication, and I was tempted for a little bit there, and I decided I was not going to go that route. And I just stopped fasting completely. No more intermittent fasting at all. Waking up, eating, and eating in that surplus. And I didn't gorge myself. I was hungry, but I ate. And my T3 regulated, my hormones went back to normal. I've had a cycle and ovulated every single month, confirmed with those methods of the LH surge strips, as well as the basal body temperature, you know, as a measurement to make sure that I've ovulated, that I'm getting that surge of progesterone at the latter half of my cycle. So there is hope. If you feel there's no such thing as like a broken person, you're not broken, you can fix things. If you're gaining a lot of weight and you've gone through a lot of restriction and a lot of fasting and you feel like you're on this weight gain train, there is hope. You can reverse that, but you may have to gain a little bit more, eat a little bit more, let go of the fasting completely before you're able to start to see things come down. But the good news is that you're going to have long-term metabolic health. If you stop the restricting, if you stop putting your body in fight flight, if you stop that stuff, long-term, you're going to be able to eat a good amount of food. You know, you're not going to have to stay at that low calorie all the time, and you're going to be able to enjoy your life and eat more food. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be able to go out and get a bunch of ice cream and cookies and cake. I don't endorse that. But you can eat, you know, 2,000, 2,500 calories a day, depending on your height, weight, age, all that stuff. But, you know, that it's a baseline that a lot of people can kind of look at and aim to get there. So hopefully that offers some help, you guys. And again, I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience. I have heard from people that intermittent fasting helps with binge eating disorder, that eating in a smaller time window does help because they're allowed to get that feeling of full. So I don't want to invalidate that experience either. I know that some people do have that, but that's just not my personal experience. So again, guys, I know this was long-winded and kind of all over the place and rambly, so I do hope it made sense. Feel free to comment below if there's something that I missed or if there's a question that you have or another video that you would like me to make. Have a really awesome rest of your day, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.